So this is going to be an interesting panel, all alone. Is it me alone? Panel. Hello? Guys. Okay. Well, maybe I should sing you a little song or something to bridge over the time until the panel has assembled. Kate? Paging Kate Edwards. Kate Edwards, please. Ah, here you are. Okay. Come on up.
Okay.
Come on up.
Where do you want me to sit?
Yes. Just have a seat in the center.
Okay.
I'll just sit over here. Yeah, this is terribly bright, is it? Okay. Okay. I'm not going to make this a very formal thing. I'll just briefly introduce you to the guys, and we're here today to speak about a couple of topics that we've discussed actually also in the last days when we met informally. I think we're all interested in seeing what is happening in Malta right now, where Malta will be heading in terms of games development. We'll also be speaking about the global market and how the changes in the industry are influencing the sales and the way that we distribute our games. Then I want to take a look at changing industries, changing technologies and platforms, because obviously, I mean, now everything is shifting towards mobile, at least it seems so. Have a look at the social environment and ecosystem of games in specific, and see if and how Malta fits into this. And last but not least, we want to speak about education and games, and all of this in about a half an hour. So that pretty much ends the introduction. We have Nikolai Sammut here. He's the general manager of the Institute of Computer Education in Malta. Then we have Kate Edwards. She's the head of IGDA, the international mother in the United States. She just came over for us here, which is great. Then we have Andy Touch. He's with Unity Technologies. He's a product evangelist. So he will be speaking a bit about Unity. And then we have Alexiei Dingli. He's obviously with the Faculty of ICT at the University of Malta. Probably a lot of people know him already. And then we have Baldacchino. He's the president of ICT Student Association here also with University of Malta. Okay. So guys, first of all, welcome to Malta. All of you who've not been here before or have come back now. Is it the first time you're here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Let's first talk a bit about the perception of Malta internationally and in terms of game development, and how we are, what I would say, emerging from under the radar, slowly at least, finally. Maybe you can start talking. Kate, when did you actually hear about Malta?
Well, I mean, is this on?
Are they turned on?
Hello?
Yes, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Well, I heard of Malta a long time ago because my background is I'm a geographer, so I kind of have to know where Malta is. So, but as a game development site, I mean, I first heard of it by the existence of the IGDA chapter, by them contacting me, and I found out, oh, I didn't know we actually had a chapter in Malta. But, you know, I think it's interesting because in today's world, with the way that the game development is working and the global interconnectivity, the availability of tools, which are relatively cheap or in some cases free, you know, the location is almost irrelevant these days. I mean, it's not irrelevant for finding talent, but even there, I mean, I know about global teams where, like indie developers, where one person, like the programmer is located in a city in the US and the artist is somewhere in another country. and they were able to interconnect, sometimes through IGDA activities, sometimes through, they meet at events like GDC, and they just get together and start making something. And so I think that speaks really well of Malta's position for the future, because it doesn't matter how small you are, it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, you are well situated in the midst of the game development sphere. So.
Okay. Andy, do you have anything to say to that?
You pretty much hit the nail on the head. Yeah, it's got to a point where you can work with anyone around the world. There's some people I work with every single day who I've never met in person, and I think as long as you can speak the language and you can interconnect that way, I mean, you'll have all these services like Skype and email and things like that. I don't think it's necessary, but it's bubbling and brewing. I first heard about Malta many years ago, but the game scene in it I first heard from Stephen over there. So, and coming here today and I saw a couple of projects over there, but I still need to check out some other stuff because it's bubbling up.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. Can you understand us well? Is that okay? Can you understand the guys? Some. Okay. Shout out if you can't. Okay. Could we somehow try to ramp up the volume on the microphones here, because the audience is okay.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just clip those off and.
Hello.
Okay. Maybe you really just want to move it closer to your... Oh, just like this. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Right. To give you an idea, when I came here in 2009, we basically founded more or less the first digital games company here in Malta, one of the first. Now, last count that I did, about 15 plus companies, 200 plus people working directly employed for these guys, plus of course all educational facilities, faculties, whatever you have, service providers, etc., etc., etc. So I think if you take a look at that, that's pretty awesome. Within like 3 to 4 years, we've managed to really kind of create something out of more or less nothing. On an island the size of Malta with 400,000 people, that's pretty impressive. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are actually being perceived nowadays. Obviously, this also probably has to do with the international market. So maybe we can speak a bit about the international market. Who wants to start? Because right now, it's quite obvious that we're not catering to the Maltese local audience, but we're going global. And who wants to set out here? Come on, let's get a discussion going. Neil, do you want to say something about it?
So, with the advent of the with the advent of the internet, we're like a global village now. I mean, everywhere as the unity that I mentioned, everywhere is reachable. Everyone can communicate with each other. So we're actually making stuff for everywhere in the world. I mean, okay, we cater for the local market, but if you cater only for the local market, you would make marginal profits, maybe even nothing at all. And at university, for instance, we're given skills we can adapt to the games market. For instance, we're not actually taught how to make a game, but we're taught skills which we can adapt to this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe a few people remember how it all started, because one of the initial companies that actually wanted to come to Malta were Ubisoft. They had approached the University of Malta and started inquiring about the possibility of setting up in Malta. Eventually they never came to Malta, and the reason was that out of those meetings we realized that we had a number of deficiencies. We were not ready for these big companies. We had technical people, but we needed to train them more on the gaming stuff. more on the design. So we had a lot of obvious deficiencies. And it was then that the Digital Malta Gaming Group first set up. It was an initiative between the University of Malta, the MCST, the Malta Council of Science and Technology, and some other entities as well. And our mission was essentially to set up the digital gaming industry in Malta. And out of that working group, there was the Digital Gaming Report, which was published last year. And I think now we're living quite interesting times because for the first time, I think we managed to identify where we're failing or where at least we need to work more. And now we're doing something about it. I mean, before that, we were simply ignoring such a market.
Right. Where would you say... what's the most important sector that we actually have to ramp up right now? What would you say?
Well, I think we're very good when it comes to the technical people. They still don't have the experience, so I think we have to get the technical people together with the experienced people, so that's one of the things we have to work up. But a very important sector where I think we still have deficiencies is the design. We're finding it very difficult to find people that are good in the design, not just game design, but obviously even graphical design as well. So I think those areas are where we are lacking at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Right. Now, if you take a look at the market in itself and the shifts that we're seeing, obviously, 5 years back, it was still very much retail-driven. Today, everything has moved into a free-to-play, more digital market space. Where do you see the chances for us here locally to go international? What's your estimate of where we're heading and how we can actually fill into little niches or gaps that open up?
Predicting where the market's going is very, very difficult. It's constantly changing. Like, I remember being told iPhones will never be big. Then next year, my nan had one. So it's a constantly adapting. So being able to predict the curve is very, very difficult. And a lot of companies spend a lot of time in R&D trying to see what the next big thing is, where the next trend is going to be. In terms of adapting to, the global market in games, you have that platform now. So things like the App Store and things like that, you can now put your game out, and instead of it just being enjoyed locally, it's now enjoyed globally around the world. And it's like Kate said earlier on, when you build something and you publish it, it's not just in one place. You can publish around the world, you can work with anyone around the world. I guess it's just a case of putting out. But mobile's probably the big one that everyone turns to. The majority of companies that I've spoken to either are moving into mobile, have moved into mobile, or are testing with moving to mobile. You'll be hard-pressed to find companies that haven't thought about it or haven't, played around with that area. Yeah.
I can also give a preview of a research which we just conducted about game usage in Malta. And the results are, they reflect a lot what's happening abroad as well. But some interesting facts is, for example, that last year, iPad usage with children for games was at 11%. Just yesterday, I read on a newspaper of the United Kingdom that in this past year, iPad usage of kids triplicated. So it's between 30 and 40%. So it's obviously one of the growing markets. Another interesting thing is that, for example, adult women like to play a lot on Facebook, all right, the Facebook casual games. And in fact, the difference between the adult women and the adult men is about 35%, which is quite huge, a huge chunk. And another thing we noticed as well is that for teenagers or the young adults, there seems to be a lacuna in the market for girls. In fact, the kind of games which they told us they played are either casual games, the top game was The Sims still, and those adventure games which portray a female character, such as Tomb Raider. But there seemed to be this huge lacuna. In fact, we noticed that there's a shortfall of 25% between the females and the males in the teenage bracket.
Very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much. I think just to give you a couple of figures here, to give you an idea of where we're moving around right now internationally, is The estimate, the latest estimate that I got from the web, from Newzoo, is we globally have about 1.2 billion gamers out there that identify themselves as gamers. So that is quite a substantial number. We are moving towards the 70-some billion US dollars revenue in 2013. Again, that's quite a high figure. Of course, you know, it's always a question as to could it be more? Is there what is reported officially? You know, what is seen as games? It's always a definition question. And one thing that is really interesting, and that goes into the market, is Latin America and the Southern Pacific Asian region is the one with the highest growth rate right now. That's actually that's the powerhouse. That's where it's happening. Not so much Europe, not so much North America, interestingly enough. Those are pretty much saturated and established. Is there a chance for us here in Malta? I mean, just looking across the Mediterranean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the global game industry, roughly about 50% of the industry's revenue on an annual basis comes from localized versions of the games. And so I was just in Bogota in Colombia a month ago right now, and I was there for an event and speaking and met with the IGDA Bogota chapter, and the amount of activity in Latin America is staggering. The amount of energy and excitement around game development. And one of the things that's powering that, at least in Colombia, is the fact that the government is very, very supportive of game development. They are extremely supportive in a way that I can't even imagine. I would love to see it even happen in the U.S., because we don't get that in the U.S. And so one of the things I often tell indie developers, even in the U.S. when they're working on a game, if you're going to do one thing other than get the game finished, is localize it into at least one language. And so, for example, if Latin America is such a quickly growing region for gamers and for game consumption, then, you know, localize it into Spanish, you know, just for a start, because you localize it into Spanish, you open up a huge market, not only in South America, but across, you know, in North America as well. Because Spanish, of course, is a very quickly growing language in the United States as well. And sometimes I realize that localization can be expensive. That's why with indie developers, I often suggest to them, you know, there's a lot of people out there who do language arts, or they're very, you know, they're bilingual. They want to get into game localization, and they want to get their credit into a game just like the indie developers do. So I know a lot of examples where indie developers actually sought out someone who did the translation for free or for very cheap, just to get their name in the game so that they had a localization credit. And that instantly opened up their game to an entirely different hemisphere.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to what Kate said, basically, as Dr. Dingli as well said earlier on in this discussion, I think in Malta, to be prepared for big companies such as Ubisoft and all the big titles, we need more resources available at hand, okay? And basically, even the government, through Malta Enterprise, they are doing this through the educational perspective. They are encouraging students to get into this industry as fast as possible, and in line with private institutions and even the public institutions, we're working hard to get to meet all the industry leaders and prospective industries and companies, so as we could adapt our educational training in line with what is required with the industry. Mm-hmm. In fact, just to mention something, ICE Malta a couple of weeks ago launched what is called My Success. Basically, we tailor-made a curriculum specifically in line with what a number of companies told us about resources that are required in the next couple of weeks. What happened, as obviously the government is supporting us all the way, we're offering students the possibility of getting funding to be trained. Why? Because we need more companies and more resources to work for these companies. Okay, so there is talent during the past months. In fact, even as ICTSA, we have created what is called, as a public event, the Creative Student Showcase. What happened there is that we connected a number of courses together, like Maya, 3D Studio Max, and Unity students, where they were connected in groups to create games. Okay, they competed, and through a judging panel, basically what we did, we connected and we offered our resources to companies out there. There were companies which were interested in coming to Malta at that time, and the only concern, the only burden they had was that they didn't know whether there were the proper resources available at hand. Through such events and through such international competitions, these people understand that Maltese talent is out there. It's at international standards. However, they have not been given the chance to actually make it work. People have ideas, we are creative, however, we don't have the proper tools to make it work. And that is where us and the University of Malta come in.
Right. Okay, Nikolai, would you say that what's the strongest focus if you would have to choose one? What are you focusing most on? Is it Unity?
Yes.
Andy is here.
With regards to game engines, basically we have met, as I already spoken, with industry leaders and prospective companies which are going to invest in Malta. And as a brief, 95% of the companies which are going to be established in Malta are going to use Unity. Okay, Unity through basically both JavaScript and C#, and in some cases even C++. Apart from that, we're obviously focusing a lot on the creative part. ICTSA in the last 2 years started training in Maya. Maya was never taught in Malta the proper way. The most difficult part was finding the proper talent to teach it. Okay, it's not about having someone knowing how to use the product. It's about someone who has experience in international projects and needs to pass on his experience to students. If someone wants to learn just a product, you can just download a book and do it. What we offer and what all the entities offer is the experience and the talent that you need to actually make it work out there.
Okay. Andy, maybe you can tell us a little bit why Unity is becoming sort of the, or you know, it seems like the only viable solution right now out there. How is that?
It's becoming that way because one of Unity's goals, it's not the main goal, it's one of them, the ones that sort of started, was to democratize game development. So in saying that, it means that to create a powerful tool and a powerful engine which can be used in a wide spectrum. That wide spectrum can be a series of things, in experience, in team sizes, in how much funding you have.
Right.
So I've seen projects with teams of like 40, 50 people working on it, you know, big funding, big companies, all the way down to one guy in his bedroom making a game, putting it on the App Store, and then making his whole living from it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people jump to Unity, is because of this broad system. There's very little, we do what we can to make very little barriers into the engine. So we have a free version and a pro version. That free version allows you to download it. It already has a whole stack of tools in there. You can build a game and you can publish it to web. Now you can publish it to iOS, Android, and things like that. And we have a pro version for those people who want to take it to the next level and sort of add extra dazzle and extra jazz to it. So yeah, we love developers, and we don't restrict our love for developers to a particular age range or a particular thing. We have developers ranging from 10 years old and younger to 100 years old.
Where do you want to drive it? I mean, now you pretty much have taken over the mobile market. Let's face it. What's your goal? I mean, where are you going?
Well, we can always improve the engine. I mean, it's only, you know, we're only dominated when every single app on the App Store is made in Unity, and we're a long way off from that. But it's just our goal to keep our customers happy. So whilst we have our customers, and that's fantastic, we need to see what they want out of it. So we talk quite a lot with our clients and talk quite a lot with our developers and say, what do you want out of the engine? Is there anything we can improve? We then take that and invest it back in. We call it, inside the company, we call it the circle of awesome. I don't know who coined that term, but it's like we create the tool and then we pass it on to the developer and say, what do you think? They give our feedback, because in the end, they're the end users. We then invest it into the tool. We then release it. properly, and then we get feedback, and we kind of have this endless loop where we work directly with our community. And obviously we're doing everything we can to strengthen that, which is one of my main jobs, is to come and talk to the community, see what they're using it for, how they're using it, what they want to get out of it. I'm asked quite a lot now about console development. So before, in the last console cycle, it's kind of, you had to be part of a big company and already have networks and the contacts to get into making console games. So we're asked quite a lot at Unity about PlayStation Vita, PS4 and Xbox One and Wii U and things like that. Now that they're becoming more indie-friendly, there's quite a few indie games being released on these consoles. We get asked quite a lot about that. So we're kind of still seeing how we fit into that, because we did a little bit of console development with PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but there's a little bit, whereas now smaller game companies are having that chance to build to their consoles, which that's kind of what we're looking at next. We're still going to support the people on mobile and PC builds, but we're kind of looking at these other publishing avenues.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think in general, just to give you my opinion, is it's quite important to not just solely focus on one platform alone and only. So right now, although it seems like mobile is here to stay, quite obviously, we see 35% growth rates and stuff like that. I think it's also somewhat of a tidal wave, which can cause issues, and nobody really knows the potential of the next gen console generation, and we just have to see how truly viable those are going to be, and what the potential for, especially for smaller companies and indies, actually will look like in about a year's time or so. It could really be interesting and a great opportunity. The same with PC. PC is the largest revenue driver of all the platforms. That's something that a lot of people tend to forget right now, because obviously everyone is focusing on mobile from an investment point of view right now, at least. Now the first ones are starting to move away from that, but PC is still what drives the most revenue in the business. And we're talking about like $27 billion or something simply for PC games of all sorts on that platform. So that's quite substantial. Now with obviously Stephen coming out with his first game, has any one of you any experience or consideration about how to actually overcome the discovery gap, the discovery problem? Because Kate, you mentioned localization as one possible solution. Any
what discovery of your game and pushing out there?
Yeah.
Well, the App Store, I find, is very overcrowded now in games. So pushing your game out there, relying on good reviews and things like that is quite a difficult tool now to sell your game, because there's so many apps are being accepted to it, and that number's only increasing and things like that. So what a lot of people do is they tend to do a lot of cross promotion. So they, instead of just targeting the App Store, they also target other things. So a lot of newspapers, they go. In the UK, they do it a lot in like gaming magazines, so getting reviews and previews, going to a lot of events. So for some reason in UK, there's a game event every weekend, and and people are always going there saying, "Hey, play my game," even if it's in a pub or it's on stage. And a lot of people are using that bubble. Twitter is also a massive tool for people to push their game out there and post updates and things like that. It's I think, to sell your game now, particularly on the App Store, you have to do a lot of different marketing. Instead, there's no real. I don't think there's one avenue you can go down, unless you're an established name like Nintendo, and then they can do what they want. Whereas indie developers have to hit all these different audiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Now, thank you very much for that. And I generally agree. Interestingly enough, for anyone who's been in the business long enough, I have the impression it's kind of moving back to where we started. It feels all of a sudden as if, oh yeah, right, PR does play a role. There was something about that, right? Or point of sale marketing essentially is back where it was in the pits the last years, and all of a sudden, you have people interfacing with clients and customers and users and players. It's not about purchasing players anymore like it used to be the last 2-3 years. This is interesting. And it's definitely something worthwhile considering for anyone out there working on a game right now. So this is important, because just having a product is just one part of it, right? You want to make money with it, you want to put it out there, you want to be successful, and that means you have to be discovered by your users somehow. And obviously you don't want to spend tremendous, huge amounts of money potentially for nothing. Let's talk a little bit about Malta as a location of making games and as an ecosphere, essentially, because that's how I came to experience it. Moving here, all of a sudden we had a tremendous cool team cohesion, and we were able to kind of really benefit from working closely in such a nice environment. How do you perceive right now the big changes in the games industry and how this reflects into Malta and size and from an indie perspective? Do you see any potential there?
Well, I think definitely there's a lot of potential, and even our strategy is to move in that direction. I think we want to cultivate the indie market. And in fact, two very important initiatives which will happen in the coming months. Well, there's already been the Game Fund, which is a start, which gave a sum of money to a number of companies to develop their own games, which was launched last year. But two very important initiatives which will happen in the coming months is, first of all, the University of Malta will be launching its own incubator, which will happen in probably next month. Mainly aimed at startups emerging from the University of Malta, including obviously the creative industry. We were discussing as well before that one of the problems is that our students manage to create great games, but then there's that additional step to take them to the market. And I think that's where we're still failing now. So by using these incubators, hopefully we can help them to take the plunge and release their games. And the second one, which is a bigger initiative, it's an initiative of Malta Enterprise. They will be launching the Creative Incubator. Probably it's a project which will happen sometime next year, but I think it's a very important, especially for startup gaming companies. And the idea is to create this ecosystem where these companies can have their own space, their own resources, guidance, and hopefully launch successful games.
Okay. I mean, looking at it, if we're talking about Maltese startups, and more people are coming over here, more professionals are moving in from overseas, wherever, wouldn't it make sense to kind of be able to go out there and start mixing teams, not just having purely Maltese teams, but actually having people come in from France or Germany or England and kind of, just creating, as Malta in itself is already becoming a very international, very multicultural European place. I think it should reflect into the teams.
I think it's already happening indirectly, because when the big companies are moving to Malta, most of them would employ a substantial amount of Maltese, so they would get to know their people. We're noticing as well that people are moving from company to company, so it's happening in a, let's say, in an informal way. Obviously, the setting up of IGDA will definitely help in that. But even having now a physical space when these people can meet and maybe discuss, share the space, I think it's an important first step to boost this communication.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, just to build on that point, I mean, one of the things, I gave this example recently where, during the Renaissance, when there were different cities that had like different schools of painting and different styles and whatnot, I kind of see that happening now in game development. You get sort of a local approach to game development that a lot of like local companies may adopt. Which is fine, because I think there's a lot of value in the local, basically cultivating that local perspective and the local creativity, which is essential. But at the same time, when you mix those together with people from other countries and other regions, it's very powerful because you get so many different perspectives together. That's why one of the reasons, like, for example, I worked at Microsoft for years, and it was a great experience because you had people from all over the world, literally, working in the company, and it was just amazing to see so many perspectives feeding into that game. In ways that you just didn't imagine. So it wasn't everyone just saying the same thing. And not to sound like a salesperson, but that's one of the reasons the IGDA exists, is to basically cultivate that, connectivity in the game development industry between different countries and locales. That's really what we're here for.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Kate. I just been reminded that we're moving close to the half hour that we had been set. So let me just finish with one last topic, and then we can go over to Q&A. And this is something that I think has been heavily discussed in the last weeks about, game education and games. Are games actually educational, right? Because coming or living in a conservative environment like Malta, or actually me coming from a conservative environment like Germany, we're all faced with the same issue of, son, daughter, what are you doing? Get a good job, become a lawyer, become a banker. What are games about in the first place? Don't waste your life, right? And how can we overcome this? Probably also a generation gap. How can we move on and actually prove that what we're doing is actually educational and it is interesting? And one thing, I just want to get rid of this because I was actually quite shocked yesterday when I was reading Malta Times. There was a guy who, quote, said, an anonymous guy on the comments, he said, "Many feel that education should be entertaining and not hard work." And the way he meant it was, it should be hard work and you should feel the pain. And I just thought, like, oh my God, this guy has just totally not got it at all, right? So how are we moving there? How do we want to push this into the 21st century?
Well, obviously I wasn't that guy. So.
No. I didn't expect you to be, honestly.
And I have my opinion about who comments on the Times of Malta as well. So but I won't say it here because I will be quoted. But what I can tell you is that we're struggling to change things quite a lot. One of the problems we have is with our educational system. Personally, I'm not happy with the way it is. The sort of thing that there is the curriculum, but it's very tight, so it doesn't really give space for students to go beyond the curriculum, especially if they're creative. Sometimes I think they're more penalized if they're creative because you're not conforming to the educational system, and I think it should be changed. The second obstacle, apart from the education, is the teachers themselves. I think we need a shift in mentality with the teachers. From our survey as well, we've seen that apparently when they're with younger children, teachers tend to play. But as they get older, play becomes something outside of the educational system. And I think that's where we have to intervene and we have to change things. In fact, we have a group at university which is called GAMED, Gaming and Education, and we're trying to influence as well the curriculum as well of the teachers, so the BEds. So the teachers, for them, it would be normal to introduce gaming in the classroom. And obviously, through gaming, you teach the subjects. It's a much fun experience. We know that children would definitely take part in it, and they would definitely take more from it than they did. Even some experiments which happened, I believe, 2 years ago, where they gave a small laptop, or I think it was, to all the children in a particular class. It proved that it was much more effective than traditional learning. So it shows that children want this interactivity. They want to explore. They want to learn at their own pace, after all, no, and enjoying it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Good to hear, actually, because my son is in school here as well, and he plays a lot, digitally as well.
Same class as my son.
Exactly. Okay, guys, let's wrap it up slowly, and I would like to come to some Q&A. Is there interest from the audience to ask us a couple of questions? You still have us here right now. Obviously, later on, we will be in the audience ourselves, and you can approach us there, but please feel free to ask us anything that you can come up with. We've got educational facilities, Unity, IGDA. Come on, let's just get something going.
Yes, Mr. Dingli, you had mentioned something about Dr. Dingli, sorry. The digital games development incubator, which is being maybe thought up right now. Could you tell us something about something more maybe about the aims and objectives and how you would intend to deliver these targets?
I don't really have the details, so I can't give you that information. What I can tell you is to have a look at the strategy, which is called the Creative Malta Strategy, or Malta Creativa. In fact, this incubator is part of that strategy. And the idea is to give startups the guidance to set up. But whereas, there's the KBIC in Cordine, that's not specialized at the creative industries. So what will be different in this incubator is that it will target those specific industries, because we all know that the creative industries are very different from traditional industries. So that's what I can tell you at this stage. But hopefully by next year we would have the incubator up and running.
Okay. Was that? Okay. Anybody else? Come on. Nobody? Here?
I'd like to ask you what you think is the future of gaming in terms of pricing, if it's going to remain subscription-based or, pay it to buy it or free to play.
It's a very nice question. And if you take a look around in the the old economy, I think actually just taking a look at the old economy answers the question. It's going to be a bit of everything. It's not going to be one size fits all, because that's where we came from. We had boxes, you could pick them off a shelf and pay money and play a game. And obviously that was very restrictive. The only reason we have 1.5 or 1.2 billion gamers now is because we got rid of this. And that means that I think there are people who really love subscriptions, and it will work for these guys. Same as some people absolutely want to buy something and feel that they've got something in their hands and forget about payment. Microtransactions is another option, as long as it's fair in a way. So from my perception, what we will be seeing is you will just have a whole bunch of possibilities of paying for your entertainment. Some free, and then you will be encouraged to either pay a full sum, go subscription, and the more you can incorporate this staged model and this variety into your own product, I think the better you will do. Not just in the local market, but in general. But obviously you have to also look at where you're going, because logically in a place like, I don't know, let's just say Sudan, if you would be focusing in 10 years' time that maybe Sudan is actually becoming an option, probably you don't want to ask them for 45 euros for a box product, right? That's just not viable. So that would be microtrans, and you just have to kind of make the best of wherever you go.
I've heard that HTML5 can be used to create games as well. I don't know much about the code, but what do you think about HTML5 and games for the future? Because one thing that I do know about it is that it can be used on any platform, be it mobiles, tablets, computers, or even consoles. So for future game developers, would HTML5 being a free tool, to my knowledge at least, would it be viable for their first games or the like?
Andy, would you like to just...
So with HTML5, a lot of people jumped on it very, very quickly. So I used to be part of the web development and design industry as well as the games, and I've still got a lot of friends in the web, and I still like to keep an eye on, what is current trends and things like that. And HTML5 came out, and it's so like Canvas and WebGL and things like that are pretty amazing. But one of the things that hold back a couple of people from making their first games in it is that the source code is very, 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 very easy to see. So I could go on, find a HTML5 Canvas game, right-click and view all of the source code for the game, copy and paste it onto a web page, and I've technically made their game. Which is what turns off some people. There are ways to mask it, and stuff like WebGL is great because you get lots of 3D interactive experiences all within the web browser. Part of the problem with things like that is web browsers. So some web browsers are still kind of behind the times and the technology that will render it at a decent rate. And everyone probably knows the browser I'm talking about. It's getting there, but unfortunately, the majority of the world still use it. So I think HTML5 and WebGL is a nice way of going about it to make it cross-platform and, without the need for a plugin downloaded, or in some cases you do. Yeah. But I think it kind of needs to find its feet a little bit more. Before it's a fully viable resource. There are fantastic HTML5 games, and there are fantastic things being made with it. It's one to keep an eye on, and I'd like to see where it goes. Especially with Flash kind of still finding out where it fits in the industry. Yeah.
Cool. We actually worked with HTML5 as a prototyping tool just recently, and it worked really nicely. Because, of course, it just allowed us to drop in stuff and just use it super easy. Security is an issue. If you want to do it, if you have backend servers running and that's where your main calculations are taking place, then obviously it doesn't really matter too much if somebody sees your code or not, because essentially, all of this stuff is on the server anyway. So that may be a solution. Another issue with it is the tool chain. You just don't have a lot of... unlike Unity, for instance, where you just can sit down and you have all the tools available, and you have the asset store and stuff. Obviously, HTML5 has this. It has to still establish this, at least in parts. So that's another issue with it. But sure, I think actually it is here to stay, and we will see more and more of it. Yes, absolutely. But step by step, actually. All right. Any further questions? No? Okay. What you can still do is, of course, just come up to us individually, ask us. I mean, we'll be milling around and talking to you guys anyway. So just feel free to approach us, okay? With anything. Great. I hope this will be broadcast somewhere or put on the web, so you can also pull that up and watch it again, or forward it to someone. And I would like to thank the panel. Thank you very much, guys. It's great. Okay. Thanks.